Dave and Sonia Braun, a childless married couple, are sitting at the kitchen table. Dave has just returned from work. Sonia arrived an hour earlier and is dressed elegantly. Near the front door, there's a small suitcase. Now, Dave, the most important thing I want you to finish this weekend is painting the nursery. The paint cans are right by the door, and the guy at the store said you need to apply at least 2 coats. Oh, before I forget, did you ask your parents if we can paint the spare room? I know they've told us to treat this house like it's our own, but it's still just common courtesy. Yeah, they're fine with it. Remind me again, Sonia, why are we painting the nursery now, when you're not even pregnant? Sonia sighed at the need to explain this yet again. She loved Dave very much. He was a good provider and, when the time came, would be a great father. But sometimes, he could be frustratingly absent-minded. Because, Dave, I'm no longer taking the pills, so it's only a matter of months before I get pregnant, and maybe another year before little ones are running around the nursery. I told you, I did some research, and it showed that even the safest paints emit toxic fumes for up to a year after application. The main reason I'm leaving with Bev this weekend is because I'm sensitive to the smell of paint. Otherwise, I would stay, and we could do it together. Now, here's what I suggest. First thing tomorrow morning, you should take my car to the service center. They'll give you a replacement for the day, and I've already booked it. Then, come back here and apply the first coat of paint. That should keep you busy until around lunchtime. After that, if the service is done, pick up the car and head to Mom's. She'll feed you lunch. Mowing the lawn usually takes you the rest of the day. Dinner for tomorrow is in the freezer. On Sunday morning, apply the second coat of paint, and please keep the nursery door closed so the fumes don't spread throughout the house. Bev told me to let you know that Mick will pick you up around 1 for a round of golf. You can have dinner at the club, and Bev will drop me off here around 8. How does that sound? Wow, I'll be one busy, organized bee this weekend, won't I? At that moment, Sonia's phone chimed with an incoming text. She glanced at it. Bev is already leaving her house to pick me up. Now, are you sure you have everything you need? Don't worry, woman. I'll be fine. Are you sure you don't want to stay here with me instead of going to a spa weekend with Bev? We could try to conceive a baby in those 2 days. Oh, tempting, Dave. But as I see it, we'll have the rest of our lives for dirty weekends, and I only have a little time left to enjoy some freedom before I become a mother. Sonia had to turn away from her husband as she said this. Her image of herself as a decent, honest person had been deeply shaken by some recent decisions. All right, Sonia. I suppose all that's left is for you to open this little farewell gift I bought for you. Dave reached under the table and placed a small wrapped box in front of Sonia, about the size of a pack of cigarettes. She looked at it, a little puzzled. Should I open it now, Dave? Can I do it over the weekend? That's up to you. You can open it now or later, but I strongly recommend using it this weekend. Sonia grabbed the gift and began tearing off the wrapping, revealing a box wrapped in cellophane. It took her a moment to realize what it was. Dave filled the silence. I had to make an executive decision, but I figure 12 should be enough protection for 2 nights and 2 days at the spa with Paul. I took the risk of buying extra large ones because I assume he's bigger. After all, you wouldn't leave our marriage and future family for someone as average-sized as me, right? Sonia froze in shock, unable to take her eyes off the box of protection in her hand. Dave kept talking anyway. I also assume your massive to-do list for me while you're away was meant to distract me from thinking about questions like, why did Sonia avoid answering when I asked which spa you and Bev are going to? Or, why did she convince me not to call her this weekend? Sonia couldn't move, couldn't think, couldn't act. Her foolproof plan, to have one harmless fling before motherhood, encouraged by her best friend, had just blown up in her face. She was stunned. Did you keep the receipt for the paint, dear? Yes, the room needs repainting, but I don't think a soft pastel shade suitable for either a boy or a girl is appropriate right now. I'll pick a different color when I drop your car off at the service center tomorrow. I suppose, thinking logically, you have no reason to rush back on Sunday afternoon since I now know what you're really going to be doing. Oh, and by the way, excellent acting. You were really convincing in your lies. Not believing in empty words, Dave fell silent and watched as Sonia destroyed herself with self-blame. Leading up to this moment, he had wondered if she had a backup plan in case the real reason for her trip ever came to light. Now, observing her face like an open book, he realized she didn't. Interestingly, she didn't bother to deny what he had said. Maybe the fact that he not only knew what she was planning to do this weekend, but also with whom convinced her that lying was pointless. Perhaps she finally remembered just how fundamentally honest she was. He waited until she looked him in the eyes, trying to get a sense of what she was thinking. And finally, she did. At last. "You think I'm still planning to leave for the weekend?" I can't go now. I have to stay." "Why, Sonia?" "Well, the very thought of settling down and having a child was frightening, so?" "No, Sonia. Why do you want to stay here this weekend? What's the point? What would you accomplish?" If Sonia had looked stunned before, now she looked completely confused. "Accomplish, Dave? Well, I can explain why, Dave. So you can forgive me. After all, I haven't done anything yet. Yes, I plan to, but not anymore. Dave, never." If Sonia had dared to look at Dave's face, she would have known just how dead the horse she was beating was. She had been justifying her actions in her own mind before finally giving in to Bev's nagging and agreeing to join her on one of her secret weekends away from marriage. If she had ever thought about the consequences of getting caught afterward, she would have sworn her marriage was strong enough to survive it. Now, knowing that nothing had actually happened, she already believed forgiveness had been given. All she had to do was weather the storm. Repent. That would get her life plans back on track. When? In 6 months? In a year? That's what she thought, which is why Dave's next words caught her off guard. "Just go, Sonia. Go to your stallion. Go to your mother. Honestly, I don't care where. Just go." For the first time since Dave's revelation, Sonia dared to look at her husband's face. He was looking down, his expression calm and unmoved. The only hint of emotion was the damp glimmer in his eyes. Sonia figured it would be best to leave for a short while. Right now, Dave was clearly angry, and she didn't want him to say something he would later regret. She was already crafting a story for her mother in her head. "How long should I stay away, Dave?" Dave looked at her and shook his head. "Forever, Sonia." Sonia's jaw dropped. Dave ignored her reaction. "Yes, we had 5 good years, but it's over. There's nothing more to say. We don't have kids, and this house belongs to my parents. We both earn about the same amount of money, so there's no need to even talk about alimony. I spent the last 2 days hiding our money. I think it's fair since I didn't waste a single cent while we were together, and you spent your share on clothes, that flashy car, and your weekend trips with Bev. I closed the accounts and credit cards right before coming home. I suppose you could go to a lawyer, but it'll cost you more than what you could get back. If I were you, I'd treat it as a valuable lesson for your future relationships. And one more thing, Sonia." Dave paused dramatically. "Get lost." Sonia was once again completely confused. She hadn't done anything to justify such a reaction, unless Dave's mention of other trips implied he thought she had taken similar trips before. All the previous ones had either been genuine relaxing weekends or her cover for Bev's antics. That gave her a sense of relief. "Oh God, do you really think I've already cheated on you?" "Well, I haven't. This was supposed to be the first time. The only time. Yes, Bev has been persuading me for ages to join her on one of our trips, but I never did. In the end, she tempted me and set up Paul, one of her lovers, and yes, apparently he really is big and—" "It doesn't matter if it was the first time or not, Sonia. Over the last 2 days, you've proven yourself to be such an incredible actress and liar that I'll never believe you, one way or the other. That's what happens when you get caught lying. You lose someone's trust. But none of that matters. You intended to make a fool out of me, you admit it, and that's the end. Now, for the sake of all the times we told each other we loved each other over the last 5 years, let's just part ways, Sonia." If Dave had been ranting or raving at that moment, Sonia would have felt better. She would have had some hope that he was just venting his anger. But the cold, emotionless tone of his voice confused and frightened her. She looked at his face again, at his eyes, and regretted it. His face remained impassive, but now his eyes gleamed like obsidian. There was no love, no pity, Not even a recognition that they were looking at anything at all, let alone something offensive to the eye. But Dave, you have to believe me. How can you be so emotionless about this? You can't just stop loving me, just like that. In the same detached voice, Dave replied, 2 days ago, I would have completely agreed with you. Now, I'm much wiser. Dave's voice grew louder with these two sentences. Finally, his face began to show anger. On Wednesday, I come home from work a few minutes early with flowers for you, I might add, and park on the lawn in front of the house to wash the SUV. I come in through the back door, intending to surprise you with the flowers, and what happens? I hear you talking on the damn phone with that damn Bev. That's what happens. And what do I hear? You were laughing, planning to lie to me so you could slip away this weekend and sleep with Paul. You were giggling, making plans to keep me busy so I wouldn't have time to think about where you were or what you were up to. But Dave, you know I always giggle when I'm nervous, You laughed while stabbing me in the back. That almost instantly drained all the love I had for you. Knowing that I would just kill you if I kept walking to the kitchen, I left. Since then, everything from my side has been an act. Dave fell silent, his chest heaving and his eyes gleaming with hatred. He fought the urge to strangle the stranger who had tricked him into believing she loved him, the actress who had wasted more than 5 years of his life. Sonia's thoughts were spinning. If she could only make Dave believe that she had never done anything except plan. This really was the first time, and she truly did giggle when stressed. She had to convince him. It was time for her to have a child. This was all part of the plan. Dave was fiddling with his phone. He pressed a button, then held it up to her. His face turned back into an emotionless mask. Her voice, her own voice, came from the phone's speaker. Ha ha ha, I guess it'll be a hot thought. Imagining poor old naive Dave painting the nursery while I'm sleeping behind his back. Ha ha ha. You could say I'm feathering our nest, trying out another man's charms in his nest. Even with all her rationalizations, filters, and delusions, Sonia acknowledged that this tiny snippet was incredibly devastating. For a moment, she was able to imagine what Dave must have felt when he first heard it. The task before her, rebuilding his trust and love, suddenly felt like staring up at Everest from base camp. At that moment, the sound of a car horn broke the silence. Bev had arrived. She remained in the car, hoping to avoid making eye contact with her longtime friend, the friend whose wife she had lured into her own morally decayed view of the world. Sonia heard the horn and realized it wouldn't stop until she went out and talked to her best friend. The problem was, her fight needed to start right here and now. She was torn by the dilemma. Dave pulled her out of her indecision. I guess that answers my question. What question, Dave? An hour ago, when I talked to Mick, he was still undecided about whether to confront his cheating wife before she left or set a trap for her while she was gone. I guess he's decided to go with the latter. Sonia glanced at the phone in her husband's hand and recalled that conversation with Bev on Wednesday. She was almost sure that Dave had heard enough from her words to figure out that Bev was an experienced adulteress, even from just one side of the conversation. Her best friend was in big trouble. She just didn't know it yet. Turning around, Sonia rushed out of the house. It was raining quite heavily, so she jumped into the passenger seat. He knows. Who knows what? Mick knows that you're going away this weekend to have sex with Peter. Without giving Sonia a chance to respond, Bev hit the gas. Soon after, Dave heard the sound of screeching tires outside. Not quite believing his luck at how easily he got her out of the house, Dave placed Sonia's suitcase on the porch, sent Mick a single word, "Enter," then grabbed his tools and started changing the locks. He whistled as he worked, and why not? He had already shouted out his anger, cried over his regrets, and banished the evil from his life. Sonia was too busy crying and ranting on Bev's shoulder to even bother him with phone calls, and that suited him just fine. After changing all the locks, he sat at his computer, copied the audio file recorded on his phone to his laptop, attached it to an email titled, "Why I'm Divorcing Sonia," and sent it to all the contacts from both his and their shared address books. He felt justified in informing their mutual friends, her family, and colleagues first. She had been very convincing when she looked him in the eyes and boldly lied to his face. People needed to be warned about what a wicked and deceitful cheater she was. He also called her mother to explain everything verbally, to soften the blow of the email so it wouldn't come as too much of a shock. He thought he owed her that. By the time Bev and the protesting, unwillingly dragged along Sonia arrived at her house, Mick had already changed the locks. While his now estranged wife banged on the door and shouted, he was completing bank transfers on his computer. All the accounts to which Bev had access now had a zero balance. Of course, she would eventually get her share, but only after finding a way to pay for a lawyer. He switched apps, opened Bev's email, and read the message received yesterday. At first glance, it appeared to be from Sonia and hinted at the fact that all their carefully planned weekends away from their marriages had been successful. But if their husbands found out and objected afterward, then something would need to be done about them. In reality, the email was from Dave, using Sonia's account, but a casual observer would never know. If Bev didn't leave quietly, he could always threaten to weaponize the email for a restraining order. When it became clear that pounding on her old front door was doing nothing but attracting the curiosity of the neighbors, Bev returned to her car where Sonia was waiting. It took only 5 minutes for years of friendship to fall apart forever. Sonia blamed Bev for convincing her to go on the weekend adventure. Bev blamed Sonia for being careless and letting her husband overhear their conversation. Bev dropped her former friend off at her old house and screamed, "Adulteress!" Sonia's calls to Dave went unanswered, and when she tried her keys, she found they no longer worked in the locks. Ashamed, she went to her mother's house, where she was greeted with a very cold reception. Over the weekend, Dave refused to answer her calls, but on Monday evening, he responded to a text. If she came to the house at 2 p.m. the next day, he would ask the neighbor to keep an eye on her while she collected her remaining personal belongings. In the meantime, Sonia reasoned that since Dave had been so emotionless on Friday, he wasn't really that upset, and if she groveled enough, he might forgive her someday. She knew he was a very manageable man. So, her plan was to get into the house on Tuesday, cook him an amazing meal, and then greet him at the door dressed for sex. On Tuesday, their neighbor let her into the house and said he would return later to check what she planned to take. Sonia wandered around the house, already feeling like a stranger. The smell of fresh paint lingered, and the door to the nursery was closed. Out of curiosity, Sonia decided to see what color Dave had finally chosen. Opening the door, she stepped inside, and the blood drained from her face. Sonia realized she had misread Dave's visible emotions. He had used the paint she had brought. Across the entire wall, angry words were scrawled in bold letters: rubbish, adulteress, stole 5 years, cheater, and betrayal. Sonia leaned against the doorframe as the weight of it all hit her. She looked down in horror. The paint was still wet and had left a wide streak on her arm. She jumped away from the door, trembling, feeling as though she had been branded with the terrible words screaming at her from the walls. For the first time, Sonia saw her actions for what they truly were: the damage and pain she had caused both her husband and herself. Crying out in empathy for her husband and for her own loss, Sonia Travis, née Brown, gathered her belongings and, filled with fear of the pain and humiliation, left her home for the last time.